I felt my son's hand connect with my cheek before I fully understood what was happening, the sharp crack echoing through the crowded party room and silencing the music and laughter in an instant. My face burned, not just from the physical impact, but from the humiliation of being struck by my own child in front of 50 guests who had come to celebrate his promotion. And as I stood there with my hand pressed to my stinging cheek, I heard him say the words that would sever our relationship forever. "Get out of here, old woman. This is our house, our party, and you've embarrassed us for the last time." In that moment, surrounded by shocked faces and uncomfortable silence, I realized that the son I'd raised had died somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger who valued his wife's drunken demands for my property more than he valued the woman who'd given him life. My name is Patricia Davis, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in the same house for 42 years, the house my late husband George and I bought when we were young and hopeful and believed we were building something that would last forever. It's a beautiful colonial-style home in a neighborhood that has appreciated significantly over the decades, now worth well over $1 million, though I've never cared about that. To me, it's the place where I raised my son Marcus, where George and I celebrated 35 years of marriage before cancer took him 6 years ago, where every room holds memories that money can't measure. George was a good man, hardworking and devoted to his family. He worked as a civil engineer for the city, earning a steady, if modest, income. And we lived carefully, saving what we could, investing wisely. By the time he died, we'd built substantial savings beyond the house. Retirement accounts, investments, life insurance proceeds, leaving me financially secure and the house paid off completely. George had been very clear in his will. Everything went to me, to provide for my care and security, with the understanding that eventually it would all go to Marcus. But George had also been clear about his concerns. "Patricia," he'd said during one of our last conversations before the cancer became too advanced for lucid discussion, "promise me you'll be careful with Marcus. I love our son, but he's always been easily influenced. Make sure he's ready before you give him access to everything we've built. Make sure he's become a man who values family more than money." I'd promised, though at the time I didn't fully understand George's concerns. Marcus was 42 now, our only child, and while he'd never been particularly ambitious or successful, he'd always been a good son, or so I thought. He'd gone to college but struggled to find direction afterward, bouncing between jobs, never quite settling into a career. He'd married once in his 20s, a brief marriage that ended in divorce, and for years afterward he'd lived alone, working in retail management, getting by but never thriving. Then 3 years ago, Marcus met Veronica. She was 34, beautiful in an obvious way, with long dark hair and a figure she displayed in tight clothes, and she worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She'd grown up wealthy, or at least that's what she claimed, daughter of a doctor and a lawyer accustomed to a certain lifestyle. When Marcus introduced her to me, I tried to be welcoming, tried to give her a fair chance, but something about her felt off from the beginning. Veronica looked at my house with assessing eyes, asking pointed questions about square footage and property values. She touched furniture and artwork, commenting on their age and potential worth. She asked about my finances in ways that felt intrusive, disguised as concern. "Patricia, have you thought about what happens if you get sick? Who'll manage your assets? Have you set up a trust? What about power of attorney?" These questions made me uncomfortable, but Marcus was clearly infatuated with her, happier than I'd seen him in years, so I tried to overlook my reservations. They married quickly, just 6 months after meeting, in a lavish ceremony that I later learned was funded largely by credit cards and loans. Veronica insisted on expensive everything, designer dress, exclusive venue, elaborate flowers, and Marcus went along with all of it, desperate to please her, to prove he could provide the lifestyle she expected. After the wedding, they moved into an apartment in an expensive part of town, straining their finances to maintain an image of success. The apartment cost nearly $3,000 a month in rent, plus parking, plus utilities, and between Marcus's retail management salary and Veronica's sales commissions, they were barely making ends meet. But Veronica insisted on maintaining appearances, on having the right address, the right clothes, the right cars. I watched this with growing concern, especially as they started asking me for money. First, it was small amounts, $500 for an unexpected car repair, $1,000 for medical bills. Then larger sums, $5,000 for credit card debt, $10,000 for what Marcus vaguely described as investment opportunities. Each time they promised to pay me back, and each time the repayment never materialized. Over 3 years, I gave them nearly $40,000, and I'd seen exactly $0 returned. But money wasn't the only issue. The real problem was how Veronica treated me, how she'd shifted from the polite charm she'd displayed during courtship to barely concealed contempt once the wedding was over. She'd make comments about my age, my appearance, my outdated ways of thinking. She'd roll her eyes when I spoke, would cut me off mid-sentence to talk over me, would make jokes at my expense that Marcus would laugh at nervously, torn between his wife and his mother. And she'd started campaigning aggressively for me to sign over my house to them. The suggestions started subtle. "Patricia, you're getting older. Wouldn't a condo be easier to maintain?" And became increasingly direct. "Why are you keeping us from the house that should be Marcus's? It's his inheritance anyway. Why make him wait until you're dead?" She'd say these things casually, over dinner, as if discussing the weather rather than my death and disposal of my property. Marcus would sometimes object weakly. "Veronica, that's not appropriate." But he'd never really defend me, never tell her firmly that my property was mine to do with as I chose. He'd just look uncomfortable and change the subject. And I'd see in his eyes that part of him agreed with her. That part of him resented that I was still alive and in possession of assets he felt entitled to. George's warnings echoed in my mind during these interactions. He'd seen something in Marcus that I'd been too blind or too hopeful to acknowledge, a weakness, a tendency to prioritize immediate gratification over long-term values, a susceptibility to being manipulated by stronger personalities. Veronica had recognized that weakness and was exploiting it, slowly turning my son against me, positioning herself to claim everything George and I had built. The tension came to a head around Marcus's 45th birthday. He'd been promoted at work to regional manager, a significant step up in responsibility and pay, and Veronica had insisted on throwing an elaborate party to celebrate. She'd planned everything without consulting me, the venue, the guest list, the catering, but she'd expected me to contribute financially. When I'd offered $2,000 toward the costs, she'd looked at me with contempt. $2,000? Patricia, the caterer alone is costing $8,000. We need at least $5,000 from you. It's the least you can do for your son's achievement. I'm happy to contribute what I offered, I'd said calmly. If you'd like a less expensive party, I'd be glad to help plan something more modest. Modest, Veronica had repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Of course you'd want something modest. You want to keep all your money for yourself while Marcus and I struggle. Do you know how embarrassing it is for Marcus to have a mother who could help but won't? I'd given her the $2,000, which she'd accepted with obvious disappointment, and the party had proceeded as planned at their expensive apartment, lavishly catered, overflowing with alcohol, filled with Marcus's coworkers and Veronica's friends, most of whom I'd never met. I'd arrived early to help set up, bringing a thoughtful gift for Marcus, trying to be supportive despite my reservations about the extravagance. That party, that celebration of my son's success, would become the night everything changed between us. The night I learned just how far Veronica's greed and Marcus's weakness would take them. The night I stopped being a mother and became an obstacle to be removed. The party started pleasantly enough. Guests arrived, music played, catering staff circulated with trays of expensive appetizers and champagne. Marcus was in good spirits, accepting congratulations from colleagues, introducing Veronica to people from work who hadn't met her yet. I stayed on the periphery as I usually did at their events, knowing Veronica preferred I not be too visible, not remind people that Marcus came from modest circumstances rather than the wealthy background Veronica liked to imply. But as the evening progressed, I noticed Veronica drinking heavily. She'd start with champagne, switch to wine, then to cocktails the bartender mixed at her request. By 8 o'clock, just 2 hours into the party, she was loud and unsteady, her words slurring, her laughter too sharp and too frequent. She'd grabbed Marcus's hand and pulled him onto their small balcony, talking animatedly, gesturing broadly, and I could see even from a distance that he was uncomfortable, trying to calm her, trying to get her to come back inside. When they returned, Veronica's face was flushed and her eyes were bright with alcohol and something else. Determination, maybe, or anger. She made a beeline for me, weaving slightly through the crowd, and grabbed my arm with unnecessary force. "Patricia, let's talk, now, somewhere private." "Veronica, you've had a lot to drink. Maybe we should talk tomorrow when—" "No, now." Her voice was loud enough that nearby guests turned to look. "I want to talk about the house, about when you're going to put it in Marcus's name where it belongs." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. This was not the time or place for this conversation, and she knew it. She was drunk and confrontational deliberately, creating a scene, trying to force my hand in front of witnesses. "Veronica, we'll discuss this another time. This is Marcus's party. Let's not ruin it." "Ruin it? I'm trying to secure our future. Marcus deserves that house. You're going to die eventually anyway, so why not give it to us now when we actually need it? Do you know how much we're paying in rent? We can't afford to keep living like this while you sit in that huge house all alone." Guests were openly staring now, conversations stopping, the music suddenly seeming too loud for the uncomfortable silence spreading through the room. I saw Marcus pushing through the crowd toward us, his face panicked. "Veronica, honey, let's go talk in the bedroom," he said, trying to take her arm. She yanked away from him. "No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. Your mother has everything and we have nothing. It's not fair. Make her give you the house. Make her sign it over tonight." "Veronica, you're drunk," I said quietly, trying to de-escalate. "You need to stop drinking. This isn't healthy. Let's get you some water and—" "Don't you tell me what to do," Veronica shouted, and she actually shoved me, her hand hitting my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble, backward. "You're not my mother. You're just an old woman standing between us and what should be ours." The room gasped collectively. Marcus finally grabbed Veronica, physically restraining her, but the damage was done. She'd assaulted me in front of 50 people, had publicly demanded I give them my house, had created a scene that could never be unseen or forgotten. I steadied myself, my heart pounding with shock and humiliation, and I looked at my son. "Marcus, your wife needs help. She's had too much to drink and she's making demands that are completely inappropriate. I think it's best if I leave now, but we need to have a serious conversation soon about boundaries and respect." That's when everything went from bad to catastrophic. Marcus, instead of apologizing or defending me, instead of acknowledging that his wife had just physically assaulted his mother and made outrageous demands, turned on me with a fury I'd never seen in him before. "You!" he said, pointing at me, his voice shaking with rage. "This is your fault. You embarrassed Veronica. You embarrassed me." "Marcus, I didn't—" "Shut up. Just shut up. I'm sick of your judgment, your disapproval, your refusal to help us. Veronica is right. You do sit in that house like a selfish old woman while we struggle. You could make our lives so much easier, and you refuse." "Marcus, the house is mine. What I do with my property is my decision." That's when he hit me. His right hand came up fast and connected with my left cheek with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent apartment. I felt my head snap to the side, felt the burning sting spread across my face, felt tears spring to my eyes from pain and shock. The room was absolutely silent. 50 people had just witnessed a 45-year-old man slap his 68-year-old mother across the face. I heard someone gasp, heard a woman say, "Oh my God," heard what might have been someone starting to intervene, but it was too late. Marcus, breathing hard, his face red with anger and possibly shame, pointed to the door. Get out of here right now. This is our home, our party, and you've ruined it. Get out and don't come back until you're ready to do right by your son." I stood there for a moment, my hand pressed to my burning cheek, looking at this man who I'd given birth to, who I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who had just struck me and was now throwing me out of his home like I was garbage to be discarded. I looked at Veronica, who was smiling with drunken satisfaction, like this was exactly what she'd wanted. I looked at the guests who were staring with various expressions of shock, discomfort, and pity, and I walked out with my head held high because whatever else happened, I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down in front of an audience. But what I didn't know as I left that apartment was that one of those shocked guests was recording the entire confrontation on their phone, and that video would change everything about what happened next. I drove home in a daze, my cheeks still stinging, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and shock. When I got to my house, the one Veronica wanted so badly, the one Marcus felt entitled to, I locked myself in and immediately called my best friend Margaret, who'd been my confidant since we were in our 20s. "Patricia, what's wrong? Your voice sounds strange." I told her everything, the words tumbling out, and by the end I was crying, something I hadn't allowed myself to do at the party or in the car. Margaret listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He hit you," she finally said, her voice flat with shock. "Yes, in front of 50 people. Yes, Patricia, that's assault. That's criminal. You need to file a police report. He's my son. He's a grown man who struck an elderly woman, his own mother, in a room full of witnesses. This isn't about family loyalty anymore. This is about your safety and your rights." I knew she was right, but the thought of calling the police on my own child, of potentially having him arrested, felt impossible. "I need to think about it. I need time to process." "Okay, but promise me you won't ignore this. Promise me you won't let him get away with this because he's your son." I promised, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. I'd spent 45 years making excuses for Marcus, overlooking his weaknesses, enabling his poor choices. Could I really hold him accountable now, even for something as serious as this? I spent the next 2 days in isolation, not answering my phone except for Margaret's calls, not going anywhere, just sitting in my house trying to understand what had happened and what it meant for my future. My cheek had bruised, a purple mark spreading from my cheekbone to my jaw, visible evidence of my son's violence. On day 3, I received an email. It was from someone named Jessica Torres, who identified herself as one of Marcus's co-workers who'd been at the party. The email was brief and to the point. "Mrs. Davis, I hope this message finds you. I witnessed what happened at the party, and I want you to know that what your son and daughter-in-law did to you was completely unacceptable. I recorded the incident on my phone because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm attaching the video. You should have this for your records, and you should know that if you decide to take any legal action, I'm willing to provide this as evidence and testify to what I saw. No one should be treated the way you were treated. I'm so sorry this happened to you." Attached to the email was a video file. With trembling hands, I downloaded it and played it. There it was. The entire confrontation captured in clear detail. Veronica drunk and aggressive, shoving me trying to de-escalate, Marcus turning on me. And then crystal clear with perfect audio, the moment he slapped me, the crack of his hand on my face audible over the shocked gasps of the guests. The video didn't stop there. It continued, showing Marcus ordering me out, showing me pressing my hand to my cheek, showing the tears in my eyes, showing my dignified exit while Veronica laughed and Marcus looked simultaneously angry and sick. The video had been taken from across the room, showing everything, missing nothing. I watched it 3 times, feeling detached from the woman on the screen who was being assaulted by her own son. That couldn't be me. My Marcus couldn't have done that, but the evidence was undeniable. I called Margaret again. Someone recorded it, the whole thing, and they sent me the video. Good. Now you have proof. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I think I need to talk to a lawyer. Over the next week, several things happened that made the situation exponentially worse. First, Marcus called me, not to apologize, but to demand that I fix things with Veronica, who was apparently upset that I'd made a scene at the party. Mom, Veronica is really hurt by what you did. What I did? Marcus, she assaulted me. You assaulted me, in front of witnesses. We didn't assault you. We asked you to leave our party because you were causing problems. And maybe I pushed you a little, but you're exaggerating. You're trying to make yourself look like a victim. You slapped me across the face. There's a video. I have a bruise. Silence. Then, there's a video. Yes, one of your co-workers recorded the entire thing and sent it to me. More silence, longer this time. Who? That's not important. What's important is that you hit me, Marcus. You're a 45-year-old man and you hit your 68-year-old mother because your drunk wife wanted my house. Don't make this about the house. This is about you being difficult, about you refusing to help us when you could easily. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my son mid-sentence, and it felt both terrible and liberating. The second thing that happened was that I started receiving calls and emails from people who'd been at the party. Some were supportive, expressing concern and offering help. Others were more ambiguous, suggesting that maybe I should work things out with Marcus, that family is important, that I should be understanding about the stress he and Veronica were under. One email from someone I didn't recognize said, "You should be ashamed of yourself for trying to destroy your son's reputation over a little family disagreement. What happens at family events should stay in the family. People like you who air dirty laundry publicly are the worst kind of people." I had no idea what they meant by publicly until Margaret called me, her voice urgent. "Patricia, are you online? You need to see something." Someone had posted Jessica's video on social media. Not Jessica herself, but someone who'd somehow gotten hold of it or recorded their own version. The video was spreading rapidly, being shared and reshared, with comments ranging from supportive, "This poor woman, her son should be arrested," to critical, "We don't know the whole story. Maybe she provoked them," to victim blaming. Why would a mother push her son to this point? She must have done something. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 1 million times. Local news stations picked it up. I started getting calls from reporters wanting interviews, wanting my side of the story, wanting to know if I was pressing charges, if I was okay, if I had comment on the viral video of an elderly woman being slapped by her son. I didn't answer any of them. I disconnected my landline and turned off my cell phone except to call Margaret and eventually my lawyer. The lawyer I consulted was named Robert Chen, a specialist in elder law and family conflicts. He watched the video once, his expression neutral, and then looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Davis, this is clear-cut assault captured on video with dozens of witnesses. You have grounds for criminal charges and a civil suit. More importantly, you need to protect yourself and your assets. Your son and daughter-in-law have shown they're willing to be physically aggressive to get what they want. We need to ensure they have no access to your property or your finances. I just want them to leave me alone. Then we need to make that legally clear. I recommend several steps: filing for a restraining order, changing your will to explicitly disinherit them, documenting the history of financial demands and physical assault, and preparing for the possibility that they'll challenge any of these actions." I agreed to all of it. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert worked quickly. He filed for a restraining order, which was granted immediately given the video evidence. Marcus and Veronica were prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. He also helped me draft a new will that left everything to charities and explicitly stated that Marcus was disinherited due to his physical assault and his attempts to coerce me regarding my property. But the legal actions didn't stop the harassment. Veronica created fake social media accounts to send me messages calling me selfish, cruel, vindictive. Marcus left voicemails that alternated between apologetic, "Mom, I'm so sorry, I was just stressed," and angry, "You're destroying my life with this restraining order. My company is questioning whether I should be in a management position. Fix this." And then the pressure came from an unexpected source, other family members. My younger sister called, upset. "Patricia, why are you doing this to Marcus? He made a mistake, but you're ruining his life. Be the bigger person, forgive him." "He hit me, Linda, in front of 50 people, because his drunk wife wanted my house. I know it was wrong, but he's your son. Family forgives. You're being cruel by pursuing legal action. So I should just let him assault me? Just accept being hit and threatened and harassed? I'm saying you should handle it privately, not turn it into this public spectacle. Now everyone knows your business. It's embarrassing for the whole family." I realized then that some people would always prioritize family reputation over justice, would always expect victims to quietly absorb abuse rather than cause problems by defending themselves. I stopped answering Linda's calls. 6 weeks after the party, I received a certified letter from an attorney I'd never heard of, representing Marcus and Veronica. The letter made shocking claims that I was mentally incompetent and required a conservatorship, that Marcus should be appointed as conservator to manage my affairs, that my recent legal actions, the restraining order, the will change, were evidence of mental decline and should be voided. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. They were trying to take control of everything I owned by claiming I couldn't manage my own affairs, and they were using my response to being assaulted as evidence of my supposed mental decline. I called Robert Chen immediately. He read the letter, and his jaw tightened. "This is an aggressive strategy. They're desperate. The restraining order blocked their physical access to you, and the new will blocked their financial expectations. So now they're trying to invalidate your agency altogether. Can they do this? Can they really have me declared incompetent? They can try. They'd need medical evidence, expert testimony, proof of cognitive decline. But the fact that they're attempting it tells me they're not going to stop. They're going to fight for your assets by any means necessary. What do I do? We fight back with evidence of your complete mental competency. I'm going to arrange for you to undergo comprehensive cognitive and psychological evaluation by independent medical experts. We'll document that you're of sound mind, making rational decisions, and fully capable of managing your affairs. Then we'll countersue for harassment and abuse of the legal process. The evaluations took place over the next 2 weeks. I met with psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists, all administering tests, asking questions, evaluating my memory, reasoning, judgment. It was exhausting and humiliating, having to prove I was mentally competent because my son was claiming otherwise to steal my property. But every single evaluation came back the same. I was completely cognitively intact, showing no signs of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. In fact, one neurologist noted that my cognitive function was well above average for her age group, and a psychiatrist documented that my responses to my son's assault were appropriate and rational given the circumstances. Armed with these evaluations, Robert filed a response to Marcus's conservatorship petition, including the medical evidence, character references from friends and neighbors, financial records showing I'd been managing my affairs competently, and a detailed accounting of Marcus and Veronica's pattern of financial exploitation and abuse. But we didn't stop there. Robert also filed a countersuit against Marcus for elder abuse, assault, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and he filed a complaint against Veronica for harassment and criminal threats based on her social media messages. "We're going on a fence," Robert explained. "We're making it clear that you won't be bullied, that their actions have consequences, and that every attempt to harm or exploit you will be met with legal repercussions." The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 2 months out. In the meantime, I had to live with the reality that my own son was publicly claiming I was mentally incompetent, was telling anyone who would listen that his elderly, confused mother had turned against him unjustly, that he was only trying to help me, but I was too mentally declined to understand that. Some people believed him. I lost friends who thought I was being vindictive, who thought Marcus's version of events sounded more reasonable than the idea that he'd actually assaulted me and was now trying to steal my property. But I also gained supporters, people who saw the video, knew the truth, and stood by me. Margaret was a rock throughout all of this. She came over almost daily, made sure I was eating and sleeping, listened to me process my grief and anger. Because that's what it was, grief. I was mourning the son I thought I had, mourning the relationship I'd believed existed, mourning the future I'd imagined where Marcus would be there for me in my old age rather than trying to destroy me for financial gain. Then one morning, I received an unexpected visitor who would change everything about how this battle would end. The unexpected visitor was Jessica Torres, the co-worker who'd originally sent me the video. She appeared at my door on a Saturday morning, apologetic for showing up unannounced, but insistent that she needed to talk to me. "Mrs. Davis, I hope this isn't too forward, but I've been following what's happening with the legal case, and there's something you should know, something about Marcus and Veronica that might help you." I invited her in, made coffee, and listened as Jessica explained that she'd worked with Marcus for 3 years and had observed things that troubled her. "Marcus has been embezzling from the company," Jessica said quietly. "Nothing huge, but consistent. He's been manipulating expense reports, skimming from petty cash, creating fake vendor accounts, and pocketing the payments. I'm in accounting, and I started noticing discrepancies about a year ago. I reported it to our director, and they've been conducting an internal investigation. They're planning to fire him and possibly press charges." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Marcus doesn't know yet that he's about to lose his job and possibly face criminal charges. And I think Veronica knows or suspects, which is why they're so desperate to get your money. They're in serious financial trouble more than you probably realize. They're drowning in debt, and Marcus's income is about to disappear. Your house isn't just a prize to them. It's their only way out of the hole they've dug." Jessica also told me something else. The reason Veronica was so drunk at the party, it wasn't just poor judgment. She has a serious alcohol problem. She's been drinking heavily for at least a year, and it's affecting her work. She's missed meetings, shown up drunk to client calls, lost several major accounts. Her company is building a case to terminate her as well. Within the next month, they're both going to be unemployed and unemployable in their current fields. This information reframed everything. Their desperation made sense now. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning, and they saw my assets as a life raft they could grab onto if they could just get me out of the way. I thanked Jessica profusely for the information and for her courage in coming forward. After she left, I immediately called Robert Chen and told him what I'd learned. "This is valuable," Robert said. "It establishes motive, shows a pattern of financial desperation and criminal behavior, undermines any claim they make about being responsible enough to manage your affairs. Can Jessica provide documentation?" She said she'd testify if needed and could provide copies of the company's internal investigation reports. Good. Let's depose her officially, get her testimony on record. This could be the final nail in their conservatorship petition. But we did something else too. Robert helped me hire a private investigator to document Marcus and Veronica's current financial situation, their spending patterns, their debts. What the investigator found was shocking even to me, who already knew they were financially irresponsible. They had over $200,000 in credit card debt. They'd taken out personal loans from predatory lenders at interest rates exceeding 30%. They'd borrowed against Veronica's retirement account and defaulted on the loan, incurring massive penalties. Their rent was 3 months overdue, and they'd received an eviction notice. They'd had 2 cars repossessed. They were, quite literally, on the verge of financial collapse. And in the midst of all this, they'd been spending money on lawyers to try to get control of my assets. They'd spent tens of thousands they didn't have on legal fees, borrowing and stealing to fund their attempt to steal more from me. The private investigator also uncovered something else. Veronica had tried this before. Before meeting Marcus, she'd been engaged to a wealthy older man, and when that engagement ended, she'd sued him for damages, claiming he'd promised her financial support and then reneged. The case had been dismissed, and the judge had noted in his ruling that Veronica's claims were transparently opportunistic and unsupported by evidence. My son had married a woman with a documented history of trying to extract money from men through manipulation and legal threats. And now she was coaching him to do the same to his own mother. Armed with all this information, Robert prepared a comprehensive response to the conservatorship petition. We had medical evaluations proving my complete mental competency, video evidence of Marcus's assault on me, documentation of Marcus and Veronica's financial exploitation attempts, evidence of their own financial irresponsibility and desperation, testimony from Jessica about Marcus's workplace theft, private investigator reports on their debts and spending patterns, background on Veronica's previous attempts to financially exploit men, character witnesses testifying to my sound judgment and capability. It was an overwhelming case, and Robert was confident we'd win. But we didn't just want to win. We wanted to send a message that would permanently end their harassment. I want them to understand, I told Robert, that there is no scenario where they get my money or my house. I want them to know that every dollar they spend fighting me is a dollar wasted. I want them to move on and leave me alone. Then we need to do more than just defeat the conservatorship petition, Robert said. We need to go public with the evidence of their financial exploitation and Marcus's assault. We need to make it clear that any future attempts will be met with criminal prosecution and public exposure. I hesitated. Going public meant more media attention, more strangers commenting on my family drama, but it also meant protection. If Marcus and Veronica's behavior was publicly documented, they'd have a much harder time continuing to harass me or convincing anyone else that I was the problem. Do it, I said, whatever it takes to make them stop. The conservatorship hearing took place in a courtroom that felt too formal and official for what was essentially a family tragedy playing out in legal language. Marcus and Veronica sat with their attorney on one side, looking desperate and angry. I sat with Robert on the other side, feeling resigned but determined. Marcus's attorney presented their case first, arguing that I'd suddenly and irrationally turned against my loving son, that I'd changed my will impulsively, that I'd filed an unjustified restraining order, and that these actions demonstrated mental decline requiring intervention. Then Robert presented our case. He started with the video, playing it in full for the judge. The courtroom was silent as everyone watched Marcus slap me, watched Veronica push me, watched me be humiliated and assaulted in front of 50 witnesses. "Your Honor," Robert said, "Mrs. Davis didn't suddenly turn against her son. She defended herself against assault and financial exploitation. Let me walk you through the evidence." He methodically presented everything. The medical evaluations showing my mental competency, the history of Marcus and Veronica's financial demands, Jessica's testimony about Marcus's workplace theft, the private investigators' findings about their debt and Veronica's history, the pattern of harassment after I'd filed the restraining order. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as Robert laid out the evidence. When he finished, there was a long silence before the judge turned to Marcus's attorney. "Counselor, your response to this evidence?" Marcus's attorney looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison admits he made a mistake at the party. He was under significant stress and emotions ran high. But that doesn't negate his concern for his mother's well-being or his capacity to help manage her affairs. His concern for her well-being? The judge's voice was sharp. He struck her in the face in front of witnesses, then ordered her out of his home. That's concern. It was a momentary lapse in judgment, Your Honor. He deeply regrets it. The judge turned to Marcus directly. Mr. Morrison, do you have anything to say? Marcus stood, and I saw him trying to compose himself, to find the right words. Your Honor, I love my mother. I made a terrible mistake that night. I was under enormous pressure at work, and my wife had been drinking, and things got out of hand. But I'm still her son. I'm still the person who should be looking out for her best interests. Looking out for her best interests by trying to take her property? The judge asked pointedly. By having her declared incompetent when multiple medical professionals confirm she's of sound mind. By harassing her after she obtained a restraining order against you. Marcus's face reddened. She has so much, and we're struggling, and it seemed unfair that she wouldn't help us when she could easily— Stop, the judge said firmly. I've heard enough. This petition is denied. Mrs. Davis is clearly of sound mind and fully capable of managing her own affairs. In fact, her decision to protect herself from exploitation demonstrates excellent judgment. Veronica made a sound of protest, but the judge continued. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning the petitioners for bringing a frivolous claim. Mr. Morrison and Mrs. Morrison, you will be jointly responsible for paying Mrs. Davis's legal fees in defending against this petition. You attempted to use the legal system to harass and exploit an elderly woman, your own mother, and that behavior will not be tolerated by this court. The judge wasn't finished. I'm also ordering that the existing restraining order remain in place indefinitely, and I'm adding to it a prohibition against any further legal filings regarding Mrs. Davis's competency or attempts to interfere with her property or financial decisions. Any violation will result in contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution. Marcus looked stunned. Veronica was crying. Not tears of remorse, but tears of angry frustration. Their attorney was already gathering papers, clearly eager to leave the courtroom. Mrs. Davis, the judge said, turning to me, I'm sorry you've had to endure this. You have the court's sympathy and support. You're free to live your life in peace, and the law will protect you from further harassment. I thanked her quietly, and Robert and I left the courtroom. Marcus tried to follow us into the hallway, calling out, Mom, please, can we talk? But courthouse security intervened, reminding him of the restraining order that was still in effect. That evening, Robert's office released a statement to the media that had been following the case. The statement included key facts from the hearing: that the conservatorship petition had been denied, that Marcus had been sanctioned for frivolous filing, that medical experts had confirmed my mental competency, and that the court had permanently barred further harassment. The statement also included a line I'd insisted on. Mrs. Davis hopes this is the end of this painful chapter. She wishes her son and daughter-in-law well, but she will not tolerate further attempts to exploit or harm her. She asks for privacy as she moves forward with her life. The media coverage was extensive, but mostly sympathetic. The narrative had shifted from viral video of woman being slapped by son to elderly woman successfully defends herself against exploitation attempt. I became, somewhat uncomfortably, a symbol of elder empowerment, of fighting back against family members who saw aging relatives as sources of money rather than people deserving respect. But the real climax came 2 weeks later when Marcus was fired from his job. The embezzlement investigation had concluded, and while the company decided not to press criminal charges, wanting to avoid negative publicity, they terminated his employment and flagged him in industry databases, making it nearly impossible for him to find similar work. Veronica was fired around the same time, her drinking problem and poor performance finally resulting in termination. They'd lost their apartment due to non-payment of rent and were living with Veronica's parents, who I heard through mutual acquaintances were not happy about housing their adult daughter and her unemployed husband. Everything they'd feared, all the financial disaster they'd tried to avoid by stealing from me, had come to pass anyway, and they had nothing to show for it except legal bills they couldn't pay and a permanent estrangement from the only family. Marcus had left. That was 2 years ago. I'm 70 now, still living in my beautiful house, still managing my own affairs with complete competency, still connected to friends and community in meaningful ways. I've used some of my resources to support organizations that help elderly people defend themselves against financial exploitation. I've spoken at events about recognizing the warning signs of family members who see aging parents as ATMs rather than people. I've tried to turn my painful experience into something that might help others avoid the same trauma. Marcus and I have had no contact since the hearing. The restraining order remains in place, and I've seen no sign that he's trying to violate it. Through the same mutual acquaintances who told me about his firing, I've heard bits and pieces about his life. That he and Veronica are still together but struggling financially, working service jobs to make ends meet, still living with her parents. I've heard that Veronica's drinking has worsened and that Marcus has become isolated, having lost most of his friends and professional contacts. I feel no satisfaction in their suffering, but I also feel no guilt. They made choices, terrible choices, and those choices had consequences. My job was never to shield Marcus from the results of his own behavior. My job was to protect myself, and that's what I did. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment at the party when Marcus's hand connected with my face. I remember the shock, the pain, the humiliation. But I also remember what came after, the decision to fight back, to refuse to be a victim, to use every tool at my disposal to defend myself and my rights. That moment of being struck became the moment I stopped making excuses for my son and started taking care of myself. Margaret tells me I should be proud of how I handled it, and maybe I am. But mostly, I just feel relief that it's over, that I can live without fear of my own child trying to harm or exploit me. That's not how I imagined my old age would be, but it's the reality I've had to accept. I've rewritten my will multiple times since then, always ensuring Marcus remains disinherited, always leaving detailed explanations of why, always including the documentation of his assault and exploitation attempts. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I want to make sure there's no ambiguity after I'm gone, no way for him to claim he was treated unfairly or that I was confused. The house, my beautiful home, where I raised my son and lived with my husband, will go to charity when I die. Specifically to organizations that help elderly people defend themselves against family exploitation. In a way, Marcus will have contributed to that cause, though not in the way he intended. His attempt to steal this house will result in this house helping to protect other elderly people from similar attempts. I've had a few people over the years suggest that I should reach out to Marcus. That family is important, that I should give him another chance. But those people didn't feel his hand on their face. They didn't hear him call them old woman with such contempt. They didn't watch their child choose greed over love, violence over respect, exploitation over relationship. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too profound. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to accept that a relationship has ended, even a relationship as fundamental as mother and son. I think about George sometimes, about his warning that Marcus was easily influenced and that I should make sure he was ready before giving him access to what we'd built. George saw something I didn't want to see, and he tried to protect me from it. In the end, his foresight and his careful estate planning gave me the tools I needed to defend myself. This emotional family drama taught me hard lessons about human nature, about how financial desperation can corrupt character, about how some people will justify any behavior if they believe they're entitled to what someone else has. It taught me that being a good mother didn't mean accepting abuse from my child, that protecting myself wasn't betraying family, that sometimes love means setting boundaries even when those boundaries hurt. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I knew, that I can fight back when necessary, that I can survive betrayal and come out the other side with dignity intact. I'm 70 years old. I was assaulted by my son and targeted for exploitation by my daughter-in-law. I fought back using every legal tool available, and I won. Not just in court, but in reclaiming my life and my peace. That's not the ending I wanted when Marcus was born 47 years ago. I wanted him at my side as I aged, wanted his support and love, wanted to leave him this house and everything I had as a symbol of a lifetime of love and sacrifice. But I got a different ending, one where I had to choose between my safety and my son, and I chose safety. I live with that choice every day, and every day I know it was the right one, because I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, without fear, without harassment, without anyone trying to harm or exploit me. That peace, that security, is worth more than any relationship that required me to accept abuse to maintain it. Some people might think I'm bitter or unforgiving, but I'm not. I'm just clear-eyed about reality and committed to protecting myself. And if that makes me a difficult mother or an unforgiving woman, then so be it. I'd rather be difficult and safe than accommodating and exploited. I'm 70 years old, still here, still standing, still living life on my own terms. My son may have slapped me, but he didn't break me. And in the end, that's the real victory, not the legal wins or the property I kept, but the knowledge that I refused to let anyone, even my own child, destroy the dignity and security I'd worked a lifetime to build. If you've experienced exploitation or abuse from family members, if you've had to make the difficult choice to protect yourself from people you love, or if you've ever been told to just forgive someone who harmed you, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if this real-life story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more emotional stories about surviving family betrayal, finding strength in difficult circumstances, and choosing self-respect over toxic relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, protecting yourself is never wrong, even when the person you're protecting yourself from is family.